Rosa, what made you want to make this film?
I was interested in performance because I'd made a film previously with a colleague at Edinburgh University, and it was on his performance drag persona. So I was interested in performance and gender, and I'd also been doing a little bit of research around race and how race is constructed and how we might perform race. So those are the two aspects I was interested in. And I'd known Zoe and I'd known her story, and currently where she was at in terms of her life, I thought was very interesting and worth more explanation. So all of the three aspects kind of came together, and then I met with Zoe and we talked and the possibility of making the film and the strand of the story ideas, how that could evolve and what elements we could add into it. And it kind of evolved like that, really.
Okay, so Zoe, turning to you, tell me a bit about yourself, what your background is.
My background is, I started off as an actor. That's what I did, but this was before Zoe became part of my life. So I was a male actor, and being an Asian male actor in the UK, I was constantly being typecasted. So I was offered the most negative stereotypes, like, you know, waiters, gangsters, cockle pickers, you know. Those were the kind of roles that were being offered to me. And it was so far removed from my experience as a person. And so I started to kind of transgenderism or exploring gender has always been something that's been part of my life from a kid. So, and I used to get dressed, I used to enjoy going out dressed, and that was closer to my experience. So from there, I created a one-man show called An Occasional Orchid with my co-writer and my director, and that did very well and got shown at the ICA and various countries in the world. And that formed the backbone for, I think, our documentary, Deconstructing Zoe, about gender being performative and also being and also the notion of Eastern femininity, and why is it that Asian women are exotified whereas Asian men are invisible. And that was kind of the two themes that I was very interested in to explore. And having been both Asian male and female, I had the privilege of exploring it.
Where do you see yourself at the moment? How would you describe yourself?
I identify as transgender, and that means I identify with a gender other than the one that I was born with. But I'm also gender fluid. So there are days where I would go out as male in my male persona, and there are days where I would go out as in my female persona, depending on what I'm doing on the day. But in my head, I guess I understand the psyche of both male and female, and because the two entities, the two genders are beginning to converge, I feel there isn't a very obvious kind of male or female persona. It's just the person, which is me. And I kind of, you know, when I'm not dressed, when I don't have makeup on, when I don't go out, you know, it's I wear kind of more masculine clothes. But the problem, well, not problem, but one of the things that has always been with me throughout my whole life is the fact that I've been fairly androgynous because I'm Asian. I don't have much of a beard. I have, I guess, a softer face. So even when I'm not dressed, people call me Miss or Madam, you know. So it's always been, you know, that case for me.
In terms of Western culture, Asian culture, and gender identity, how where does gender identity as a concept fit into Asian culture now? How is it perceived?
I think it depends on which culture you're talking about. I think in Thailand, for example, they are much more, Thailand and Philippines perhaps, they are much more accepting. I'm talking about Southeast Asian culture because that's where I'm from. I'm originally from Malaysia. I was born in Malaysia, but I've lived here for a long time. So I identify as Southeast Asian, which is slightly different. I think the mindset is slightly different from the Northeast Asians. So like Koreans, Chinese, mainland Chinese, Japanese have a different culture than the Southeast Asians, which are Indonesians, Malaysians, Filipinos, Thais. And I think within those, within the Southeast Asian culture, I think transgender have always been part of the fabric of society. How assimilated they are is a big question mark, because very often they live on the fringes of society, so they don't really assimilate into the mainstream or find it very difficult. So in terms of acceptance, I think that's your question. I think in terms of acceptance, I think within certain culture, it's accepted because people see them on the streets. You do see them out working as makeup counter girls, or you see them, you know, working in bars, you know, and it's, socially, whether it's acceptable or not, I think, yeah, I think you have this, they go through equally the same kind of challenges, whether, you know, whether the society and family will accept them as they would, as a transgender person would in the West.
Now, in the film, you talk about the metaphor of the orchid. Just tell us about that a bit.
Well, I used, orchid, for me, is seen as a very exotic flower in the West. Okay, we have this association of orchid being exotic, but if you look at orchid as a species of plant, it has a lot of similarities with the life of a transgendered person. It has got incredible powers of mimicry, where they can take on the scent of a female to attract men. They live some of them live underground in very, very inhospitable conditions. So there are all these kind of metaphors that we thought, when I was researching about orchids, seemed to fit the life of a transgendered person, and so that became kind of the running theme.
There is obviously a long tradition in this country of cross-dressing,
Yes.
In theatrical
Absolutely.
circles,
Yeah.
going way back, you know, to my own childhood of Danny LaRue, and more recently Paul O'Grady as Lily Savage, and so on. So, how do you see yourself fitting into that culture, into that sort of? Do you see yourself as a?
Well, I think well, Paul O'Grady, for example, Lily Savage is a drag queen. So he does when Lily was performing, it's a different kind of gender performance, because it's perhaps parodying of the female form. So drag is very, very large. I think with lots of transgender people, we tend not to try to attract too much attention when we go out. Whereas I think drag is about attracting as much attention as, you know, to get effect. Whereas I think for transgender people, it's very often trying to fit in and to so-called pass. So you pass without being kind of people raising too many eyebrows or suspecting that you are not the gender that you're portraying.
That sort of leads on nicely to this idea of gender identity. I mean, a lot of people from a very early age feel, and we've heard this phrase many times, I was born in the wrong body.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely hell-bent from a very early age on changing sex.
Yeah.
Has that ever impacted on you?
I have questioned that. I've asked that of myself. That condition that you talk about is actually gender dysphoria, which means you feel trapped in the wrong body, and what you see and what you feel what you see in the mirror and what you feel in your head doesn't tally. You know, there's a discrepancy. And for a lot of transsexuals, what they want to do is to rectify what they see is a mistake of nature. I don't have that discrepancy in the way I feel and the way I think. I'm very, very comfortable in my duality, and also my fluidity, I think.
In the film, you talk about an alter ego as an enhancement, and that's quite a broad concept in showbiz generally, isn't it? Bruce Forsyth speaks of these two people. He's Bruce Forsyth and he's Brucey. And Brucey is a very different person that comes out on that stage, and it's often a lot of conflict, you know, conflicting feelings in performers. How do you feel when you're in a performance mode?
I think we all have to perform. I think to a certain degree, when we leave our house, we perform. Whether you take on the role of a male, for me, whether I take on the role of a female or a male, or for a mother, whether she takes on the mother or she takes on the wife or she takes on an independent woman, a working mother. I mean, you know, so we all, when we leave the house, we perform. So I think for perhaps a transgendered person, it is a little bit more heightened, because you are taking on something which is quite fundamental, which is your gender, and turning it around and performing an opposite gender, whether it's a girl performing, you know, who's a transgendered male, going out there and presenting a male persona, or someone like myself presenting a female persona.
You also talk in the film about physical appearances and how traditionally Eastern Asian males are more diminutive compared to the West, which in a way, does that make it easier to adopt a feminine persona?
In terms of physicality, yes, I think for a lot of Asian transgendered males, it's easier to cross because, as I said, you don't have, you know, a very heavy beard growth. You don't, you're not very large in stature, so it's easier to cross over. But I think that's a kind of a generalization because you know, lots of Asian men these days are also quite broad and quite big, and you know, they go to the gym, and you know, if they start to cross-dress, they'll look like a bloke in a dress. So, yeah.
Within the film, there are other characters, obviously, and there's one in particular. I'm terrible with names, and I can't remember his name, but he identifies as being bisexual. And it's something that he came to realise or became more honest about as he got older.
Yeah.
Is that a general you know?
Well, I think Neil's a very good friend of mine, an old friend of mine, and he very kindly agreed to give a male perspective, which we thought was very, very important and relevant to the film that we were making. Because instead of just being my mates or just me talking, I think understanding a guy who is attracted to transgendered women, also, to understand where they were coming from was quite interesting. And Neil has very, very strong opinions. For example, he thinks that if he is with a pre-op transsexual person or pre-op transgendered person, which means his partner has male genitalia, he would be bisexual. Okay, I think a lot of men who are attracted to transsexual or transgendered people identify as heterosexual and would have a problem identifying as anything other than heterosexuals because they feel, I'm attracted to the female form. You see, I mean, I think labels are very dangerous, and I think labels in modern society is you know, no longer, everything's in the gray areas now. On one end of the spectrum you have heterosexuals, on the other end you have homosexuals, in the middle you have bisexuals. And I think everyone is at varying degrees of the sexuality spectrum at any different points of their life. At some point you might be more heterosexual with bi-curious tendencies. Maybe then once you've acted out, you become more bisexual, and therefore, do you know what I mean? I think everybody is very fluid, and I think with Neil, as he said, you know, as he became older, he became less concerned about what people thought of him, and and it was all about, I'm going to lead the life that I'm going to lead. You know, why should I care what other people think? And that's a much more healthy way to have. And of course, that's the ideal situation because not everyone can be so reconciled with their sexuality or reconciled with, you know, with themselves. Because at the end of the day, depending on your environment, depending on where you come from, depending on what kind of personality you are, you know, are you strong enough to go out and tell your mates, hey, you know, I have a transsexual girlfriend? Probably for a lot of men, the answer is no. You know, I think it's very, very difficult still for people who are attracted to transgender, or how shall I put, dip their toes, to openly you know, express their desires, because it instantly questions their sexuality. It raises up the whole, you know, very often you meet, you know, well, I meet guys, and the first thing they will say to you is, I'm not gay. You know, and it's just like a broken record. You know, it's you know, okay, yes, right. Because if you were, and I think yes, they probably are not gay, because if they were, they'd be attracted to masculinity. You see, I mean, I talk about something in the documentary, which is the fascination with the phallus. I think men are fascinated with the phallus from day one, from when you are born, and as a little boy, you go, what's this little thing between my legs, and why does it You know, why is it that I have one and a girl doesn't have one? And then you go through puberty, and then things change, and you go like, oh, okay, this actually does something. And you go to a gym, you go to a locker room, and you go like, oh, okay, oh, he's got something that is very big, very small. I mean, there's this whole kind of like, and you listen to banter among lads. There's so much to do with, you know, someone being well endowed or someone being, you know, I mean, so there's always an obsession, it's a fascination with it. And I think for men who, how shall I put it, who play with transsexuals, who go and, you know, who experiment, it's just taking that to us, you know, to a sexualized, or, you know, to a different level.
Just finally, Zoe, what's the future for you? What plans have you got?
I'm now much more behind the scenes. I work as a producer, so I've produced worked on two or three features. Currently have a feature out which is doing the festival circuit, so I'm going to lots of film festivals. And I've also got a couple of film projects that I'm developing, and a play actually, because so I've just been talking for the last 5 minutes about a man who is attracted to transgender. I want to explore the life of a man who has an affair, a married man, who has an affair with a transgendered woman, and is discovered by his wife, and I want to see how it impacts his life. That's the project I'm currently working on.
Excellent. Rosa, what are the plans for this film and for other projects?
This film is going out on the festival circuit, and we're going to see how it gets picked up at festival circuit. It's already been picked up by Seattle Transgender Translations Transgender Film Festival as well, so we're hopeful that it will be picked up by a few more. And then we've also done a shorter 20-minute version for maybe places who can't have the the time slot to show a longer version.
Okay. Rosa, Zoe, thank you both very much.
Thank you.